Boy, got single tap. Oh, the game sucks, don't it? All right. So Redragon sent me out there Fizz. It's the K617. You guys saw my first impressions with that about a week or two ago. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reason why they sent it out to me because it's typically it's a compact, fast, and affordable keyboard strictly for FPS gaming. Like that's really what it's supposed to be for. But really is it? You know what I mean? That's kind of the aspect and the question that I'm asking here. So I had to decide to jump on, plug the keyboard in after fixing some of the issues we'll talk about here in a second, and jump on BattleBit Remastered, for that nostalgic gameplay feel, and, just to kind of, show you guys what BattleBit looks like now in 2025. For people that like BattleBit, you might want to see in the background. But I thought BattleBit was the perfect game to test this in because the BattleBit playing environment is not only large scale, but it's also fast paced. And it's a game that can run on any PC, and then especially on my PC with my 3070. It just runs fucking fantastically, right? Just absolutely beast of a performance. So gives you guys the best visual quality and overall fidelity confidence to see this keyboard actually in action. And BattleBit kind of has a little bit more additional keys than the normal FPS title. So that's kind of why I chose this as the showcase game. Now, this is supposed to be something you can just throw into high intensity matches with overall confidence. It has a 60% layout, utilizes magnetic switches, which is slightly different than your standard red, blue, brown, etc. And these ones are particularly pink. So we're just going to call them pink switches for right now. That's how they look, pink. But yeah, magnetic switches, you know what I'm saying? Budget friendly, right? So on paper, it looked like a killer pickup. Like it feels like a killer setup. Like the whole keyboard itself is very, very tiny when I put it on top of my my workspace and my gaming space. Yeah, I'm playing with it right now. Don't mind that, right? But the idea with this particular board is that, we need to have a real talk about this board and address not only the first concerns that I talked about in the first video, how we fix those concerns, and then how it performs now, right? That's what we need to talk about considerably, right? So, like I was saying, out of the box, it really didn't deliver, and Redragon was kind of disappointed in the fact that they didn't really receive the feedback that they were looking for. They wanted me to get the board, they wanted me to be impressed by it and give a killer discussion or, killer feedback on it and maybe some gameplay, whatever the case may be, right? And etc. But let's just talk about the rough start. Lagged, missed inputs, no flow. Like that kind of summarized everything, right? From the first plug-in and play session, the Fizz gave me problems. It just didn't feel smooth or responsive. I was getting laggy key response, stuttered inputs, especially during movement-heavy firefights, phantom key repeats mid-match, overall no rhythm during movement and reloads, which is a death sentence in fast-paced games, right? I tested across different ports, replugged the cable, tried multiple titles, same result. At one point, I thought I had a defective unit. The lightweight frame also wasn't helping. It would slide during intense moments without a mouse pad locking it in, and I don't really use a mouse pad with my keyboards. And yeah, it's small, so that's the reason why it slides around. And the actual rubber grips aren't as the rubber feet aren't as slick resistant as its predecessors, as its older brothers, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? As the ones that I have here as well. It sticks, but it still slips somewhat slightly. You can just obviously lay down a mouse pad or a mat, and that will just, that would just fix the issue, right? Now, Redragon software isn't exactly award winning, and that's something that they're not going to want me to tell you or they want you to know, right? But it's outdated and a little janky, and sometimes when you're going to it, you're trying to figure things out. It doesn't even fit the full screen, and it's like, what the hell am I looking at? But when I plugged it in, it said, "Oh, all keys 2.0, everything calibrated right now." And I said, "All right, well, let me." Yeah, okay, that was later down the road. You know what I'm saying? But I decided to take one last swing at fixing things through it. You know what I'm saying? After messing around with the key response settings, seemingly updating firmware, basically by plugging and unplugging, and then, downloading the calibration installers, what it's called, but really it just connects you to like all of their keyboards that are hardwired, mechanical ones, right? But also resetting to some defaults and then reassigning some key behavior, things started to click, like literally. And this keyboard is extremely clicky. The magnetic keys aren't my vibe. You know what I'm saying? I like the look of the board. I like how it feels, but the magnetic clickiness is just not my vibe. Some people may like it. I'm not a personal fan of it. It is what it is, right? So the input delay, gone. The weird ghost inputs, no longer happening. The key response, sharp, clean, and absolutely crisp. What did I do? I don't know what I did. Sometimes when you're playing around with hardware and peripherals, some things just work themselves out. And then when you download programs and software, sometimes you might be downloading something that you really shouldn't be downloading. But I had done this already, right? And I said that in my first video. I was like, hey, I had downloaded the software, tried to figure things out, and I was still having issues. And I was having issues mainly in games like Delta Force and Call of Duty and other fast-paced titles, right? And that was where competitive speed to key to input is what you need, right? You know what I'm saying? Now, let me continue, right? So it took a bit of patience and trial and error because like I said, the software is outdated. It's really hard to fumble around with and figure out what's going on. I went from many different inputs to trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and like I said, I even had to go into my my settings on my PC and like mess around with the keyboard settings in there to figure out what the hell is going on and fix some shit, right? But once I dialed in the settings, the board started behaving like a whole new different piece of gear. Now let's talk about the post-performance fix, and how it's doing now, right? Because after that fix-up phase, the Fizz K617 went from borderline unusable, practically frustrating, me wanting to throw the damn thing in the trash, to shockingly capable. I might be using this a little bit more often. Maybe I should have given this a second chance. Blah, 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 blah. And the magnetic switches, really started to shine once the board was properly calibrated. Keep that in mind. During shipping, you might lose calibration. And when you get it, you might have to play around with your PC software, Redragon software, and other things like PC settings, Redragon software, and other things just to kind of get it to flow correctly. Because during shipping, it can lose calibration. And why? They're magnetic switches. Who thought at Redragon that let's use magnetic switches? I don't know, but it works, and it's cool. It's a cool concept. But when you're like typing and doing all that, you really don't know the difference between this keyboard and the 8 other keyboards that are, and the myriad of other keyboards that Redragon owns, right? This one is extremely loud and clacky, like when you type, and you guys can hear that. Now you can't hear that, but it's extremely loud and clacky. Good thing my noise cancellation feature is working really great on my headset, my phone right now. But other than that, movements were fluid, taps felt instant, and tracking and / reacting in close fights felt way more locked in. At an 8K pull rate, that shit better be locked in, especially if I'm pressing WSD and I'm trying to slide around the map, jump a little bit and do my thing. I better be 100% dialed in with this damn thing, right? 100%. So this board, the board is magnetic in its feel, right? Fast action, snappy recovery, and almost no fatigue in long sessions. The board wants to go fast. It just needed a push in the right direction. So in tight desk setups or competitive loadouts where mouse space is king, the 60% layout, which I'm not a fan of either, but it works for like I said, tight FPS setups, competitive scenes, etc., etc. Very esportsy with this keyboard, I feel. It's a huge win. Okay, it's compact, lightweight, and the switch actuation feels very dialed in. Now it does. I've used it in, BattleBit, Delta Force, and a few other games, but you're only seeing BattleBit for obvious reasons, because it's an underrated indie shooter, and I just kind of wanted to give it some, wanted to give it some love. That's what I wanted to do, okay? And I also use it in a few tactical shooters. Not ideal for tactical shooters because you need a little bit more keys to do a little bit more things, but it works, right? For the basic inputs, it works. Reloads, leaning, quick swapping gear, it feels smooth. It feels smooth. I wouldn't recommend this for productivity, like consistent productivity, but I would recommend it for as a secondary keyboard for productivity. Like I was saying in the first video, like you're not going to use this keyboard to consistently type out stuff and send out emails and shoot this kind of. You're not doing this. Is not one of those full-on workflow productivity keyboards. The ISA Pro is better for that, and Redragon also has a true 100% keyboards for that if you need that, right? This is more like secondary productivity, where you got a controller plugged in and you got this keyboard to help you out, or utilize this keyboard in an FPS space, or utilizing it in on your second monitor or for your second monitor. It is what it is, right? You know what I'm saying? So that opinion still remains the same. I feel like it does have potential to be a good esports gaming FPS keyboard for the right person. I'm not that person because I'm just not that person. Okay, I enjoy playing games like BattleBit and Delta Force when I got shit else to do. But hear me out. It's just too small for my liking. 60% is a little too small for my liking. I like to feel like I have a little bit more to work with. I like the Behemoth because it provides a 70-ish% board and gives me all the inner workings of things that I like to work with. You know what I mean? All the features, things I like to work with on a keyboard, and it's quieter and it has a cool little screen. And I like the ISA Pro because it's a full-length keyboard for games like Dune and other MMO titles and simulation games, which, yeah, most definitely, right? But I would recommend this as a dedicated gaming keyboard for individuals that are into the smaller types, the petite boards, right? It's punching way above its price now that it's tuned up. So what are my final thoughts on this, given everything that I went through, all the frustrations, the multiple emails to Iris at Redragon? Good Lord. All right, the Redragon Fizz K617 frustrated me very, very, very early. But once I got it properly calibrated, it became one of the snappiest, most responsive FPS-focused boards I've used under $50. It looks clean. It looks great on the desk. The lighting is clean. And once it's dialed in, calibrated, blah blah blah, update, whatever you want to call it. It performs like a mini magnetic keyboard meant for speed. Like literally, that's what it is. Let's literally what it is. It's not perfect. You have to work to get it there, or because depending if you probably bought it off like Amazon or something, and it's in an Amazon warehouse, the shipping might be a little bit better. But if you're like going through like UPS or USPS or something crazy like that, or whatever, DHL or wherever you're ordering from, the shipping might be a little messed up. You know what I mean? It might come to you in a frustrated condition, and you're trying to get your warranty. Hold off on that warranty. Glad you're watching this video, right? Check this out. If you're willing to tweak this board, it becomes a serious threat in the competitive gaming environment. And by what I mean by tweak the board, you got to download the software, update, figure out your settings in your PC, etc., etc. Like the stuff that other reviewers is not going to tell you about with this particular board, I'm telling you right now. This ain't even a review, low key. This is just me saying, hey, this is my experience with the board. This is how I feel about it. I don't care about all the weird little quirky, techie, nerdy features of the board. I just want the board to work. You know what I mean? And work flawlessly in the environment it's being used in. And that's what this thing does. So what are the pros to this bad boy? You got fast switches, great layout for FPS because it's small. RGB looks solid, by the way, and it's super lightweight. What you need to watch out for is that it will need calibration. You will have bugs early, possibly, ish. And the software is kind of weak. Might be a turn off. Those three things might be a turn off to people, low key. But the fixes is that, the software needs tuning to solve most problems. And that's literally what Iris said in her email to me when she said, oh, I should have warned you first. What? Okay, I understand. I perfect. Let me figure this thing out. I've figured out many things. I've figured out how to put my GPU and stuff in my own damn PC. Let me figure this out too. And that's what I did, right? So this is going to be best for competitive FPS, high-speed shooters, and small desk setups. If you need something for tactical, large-scale games or MMOs or something like that, or simulation games, there are other options for you. This keyboard is not going to be ideal for that. So what's the final word here? It's a budget sleeper hit once it's properly tuned, and that may or may not turn some people off, but for me, it kind of works. So when I'm playing games like Battlefield Remastered, Delta Force, Call of Duty, Battlefield, blah, 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 and we're streaming those games, you can expect to know that I'm utilizing the K617. I'm utilizing the Fizz for those particular games, or I might be using the Behemoth, but no, I'll use the Fizz. I will be very loyal to this one, and I will use the Fizz for that, so you guys can see that in action when I'm streaming those competitive style FPS games, right? So with that in mind, if you're still interested in this after my kind of updated feedback and overall experience with this damn board, this is what I'm going to tell you. There's a link in the description below with the code that tells Redragon I sent you and gives you a discount and supports the channel in the process. Appreciate Redragon for sending this out to me, and thank you, Iris, for being so patient with me with this. I can't wait for the next product to hit my doorstep. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I will come back with some future discussions on the other stuff they sent me in the future after I've put in some hours on them. So keep that in mind. But with all that being said, that's all I have to say about the Fizz.